It was early morning at the Metro Police Training Facility, the kind of morning where the cold air bites a little and every sound echoes. Steven Seagal stepped out of his black SUV wearing simple black jeans, a loose jacket, and dark sunglasses. No entourage, no announcement, no badge on display, just a quiet, calm walk toward the precinct door. Inside, rookies were lining up for morning drills. Officers were scattered around, sipping coffee, chatting, preparing for the day. Nobody expected a new face to walk in, especially not a man with such a commanding presence. But because he wasn't in uniform and wasn't flashing identification, most officers didn't think much of him. Most except one. Officer Grant, a young, sharp-tongued cop with a reputation for being overly aggressive, spotted Steven from across the hallway. Grant narrowed his eyes, instantly assuming the worst. "Hey, you," he barked, stepping forward with loud, echoing boots. "This area is restricted. What are you doing in here?" Steven paused. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Just heading inside." Grant scoffed. "Inside? Not without permission, you're not. Show me ID." Steven remained still, hands relaxed at his sides. "I'm expected here." Grant took a step closer, chest puffed out. "I didn't ask if you're expected. I asked for ID." He looked Steven up and down, misjudging him instantly. "You think you can just walk around like you own the place?" A few officers turned their heads, sensing rising tension. Some whispered, "Who is that guy?" Others shrugged, assuming he was just another civilian who wandered in. Steven didn't move, didn't argue, didn't explain. His silence only irritated Grant more. "I'm talking to you." Grant snapped. "Don't ignore me." Steven finally turned his head slightly, his voice firm but still polite. "I'm not ignoring you, officer. I'm simply going where I need to go." Grant's jaw tightened. "Not today, you're not." He extended an arm in front of Steven, blocking his path. "Last chance. Show ID or get out." The hallway fell silent. Officers watched the standoff, unaware of who was standing in front of them. They didn't know that the man Grant was threatening was moments away from revealing a truth that would shake the entire department. And what happened next shocked every officer in that room. The tension in the hallway thickened like fog. Officer Grant's voice had already raised enough to make half the precinct glance over, but now he doubled down, determined to prove himself right, even if he was wrong. Steven Seagal stood still, relaxed, and completely unbothered. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't trying to intimidate. He was simply existing. And somehow, that annoyed Grant even more. "I said show me ID," Grant repeated, this time with an impatient tap of his finger against his holster. "Don't make me say it again." Steven finally reached into his jacket pocket, but instead of pulling out identification, he simply folded his arms and said calmly, "I'll show ID when I'm inside." Wrong answer for Grant. "Oh, you're one of those types, huh? Think you're above the rules." Grant snapped. His tone was dripping with arrogance. "Let me guess, you're some kind of martial arts tough guy who thinks he can stroll in here like a movie hero?" Two rookies looked at each other with raised eyebrows. "Why does he look familiar?" one whispered. "Dude, maybe he's an actor," the other replied. "But I'm not sure." Grant overheard them and laughed mockingly. "An actor? Please. If this guy's an actor, then I'm the president." Steven didn't react. Not a twitch. Not a smirk. Nothing. That bothered Grant more than insults ever could. "Listen carefully," Grant said, stepping so close their boots nearly touched. "I've had enough of this. You give me ID right now, or I'm escorting you out in handcuffs." Steven's eyes finally shifted behind his sunglasses. "I don't think you want to do that," he said softly. Grant laughed, a fake, loud, show-off laugh meant for the audience forming around them. "Oh, trust me. I do." The rookies stepped farther back. A training officer murmured, "Grant needs to calm down." Another replied, "He won't. That guy's ego runs the department." Meanwhile, Steven remained still, composed, as if he were studying Grant, not judging him, not angry, just observing. Grant misread that calmness entirely. So now you're threatening me? Grant barked. Oh, you made a big mistake. He grabbed Steven's arm suddenly, tight, aggressive, trying to force him against the wall. The crowd gasped. But Steven didn't budge. Grant's push felt like trying to move a mountain. Steven's arm didn't tense. His posture didn't shift. He simply turned his head slightly, and Grant's grip slipped off like water sliding off metal. Grant stumbled back a step, blinking in confusion. What the? He whispered under his breath. How did you? Steven remained silent. Grant's embarrassment mutated instantly into anger. Now you're resisting. Put your hands behind your back. He reached for Steven's wrist again, this time using both hands. Steven gently moved his arm, and Grant nearly fell forward. It was smooth, controlled, like someone redirecting a child who wandered too close to danger. Stop moving, Grant yelled. I haven't moved, Steven replied. That made Grant even more furious. By now, almost the entire lobby was watching. Phones weren't allowed inside the training facility, but officers whispered, shifting, trying to understand what was happening. Was this man dangerous? Was he an intruder? Or was Grant simply acting out of ego? A senior clerk whispered, why doesn't he just show ID? A detective shrugged. Maybe he doesn't need to. Grant wasn't listening to anyone. His pride was bruised, and he wasn't about to let that go. You want to do this the hard way? He said, tightening his stance. Fine. He took a step towards Steven again, but before he could lay a hand on him, Steven lifted one finger. Just one. Officer. His voice was low, steady, and so controlled that several people felt the hair on their arms rise. Grant paused, uncertain why such a small gesture had such a big effect. You're escalating a situation that never needed escalation, Steven said. You asked me to enter. I'm entering. You asked for respect. I've shown you respect. But if you're determined to push this further, he paused, letting the silence sharpen the moment. You won't like where it ends. Grant swallowed. For a moment, he actually hesitated. But his ego surged again. Stop talking in riddles. Show ID or get out. Steven simply said, I told you. I'm expected. Grant scoffed. Expected by who? You don't belong here. The crowd stiffened. Steven inhaled slowly. That's where you're wrong. Grant crossed his arms, sneering. Oh yeah? And who exactly are you supposed to be? Steven lowered his sunglasses slightly, his eyes locking onto Grant with a calm intensity that made the entire room freeze up. But before Steven could answer, someone shouted from across the hallway. Grant, stop. Do you know who you're talking to? Dozens of heads snapped toward the voice. Even Steven tilted his head. The energy shifted instantly. Something big was about to be revealed. Have you ever seen someone abuse their power? Comment below and tell us which country and city you're watching from. Officer Grant froze for half a second when he heard the shout. But pride is a dangerous thing. Instead of backing off, he turned his head sharply, annoyed that someone had interrupted his moment of authority. Who said that? He barked, scanning the hallway. Sergeant Dawson, a well-built veteran with 20 years on the force, stepped through the crowd. He looked tense. Too tense. His eyes were locked on Steven, wide, almost alarmed. Grant scoffed when he saw who it was. Oh, Dawson. Relax. I've got this under control. Just removing a trespasser. Dawson didn't even look at him. He kept staring at Steven. The room grew dead silent. Grant frowned. What? Why are you looking at him like that? But before Dawson could answer, Grant turned back to Steven with renewed anger, because Steven was still standing there, perfectly calm, hands folded behind his back, as if none of this chaos affected him at all. And that calm annoyed Grant more than any insult ever could. All right, that's it, Grant snapped. You're resisting my orders. I'm detaining you right now. He reached again, this time attempting a more forceful hold, something between a wrist lock and a takedown maneuver. But what happened next, no one in that room would ever forget. Steven gently shifted his feet, not aggressively, not dramatically, just a soft pivot of his heel, and Grant's grip slid off as if he'd grabbed fog instead of a man. Grant stumbled forward, nearly falling on his face. The crowd gasped. Dawson muttered under his breath, "Oh no. Grant, you idiot." Grant's face turned bright red. Now he wasn't just angry. He was humiliated. "You think this is funny?" he shouted. "You want to fight me?" Steven blinked slowly. "I want nothing of the sort." Grant's chest heaved. "Stop talking like that. Stop acting like you're—" Steven cut him off with a single, calm sentence. "I warned you. This didn't have to go this way." Grant lunged again. And this time, Steven moved. Not much. Just enough. A soft shift of the shoulder. A slight bend of the elbow. A small redirection. Grant's own momentum betrayed him, sending him spinning slightly off balance. Steven guided him away gently, almost respectfully, keeping Grant from hurting himself while also making it very clear. Grant was no match. The room filled with whispers. How is he doing that? He didn't even touch him. What kind of training is that? Who is this guy? Grant, breathless and humiliated, tried to regain composure. But rage burned in his eyes. "That," Grant pointed at Steven, voice shaking with anger, "is assault. You're done." But Steven didn't respond. He didn't explain, didn't defend himself. He simply said, "Officer, I've been more patient than you deserve." That sentence hit Grant like a punch. He exploded. "Put your hands behind your back now." He reached for Steven again. Steven sighed, a long, disappointed sigh, as if he'd hoped Grant would stop, but knew he wouldn't. Grant grabbed. Steven moved, and the entire room erupted in shock. Steven gently redirected Grant's arm with a small circular motion, so subtle that half the officers missed it. And Grant found himself twisted slightly, completely immobilized, his wrist locked, his knees bent just enough to stop him from moving without causing pain. Grant's eyes widened in disbelief. How did you?" he stuttered. Steven let go instantly, allowing Grant to step back without falling. That made it even worse. Steven wasn't fighting him. He was controlling him. Effortlessly, Grant's humiliation skyrocketed. Officers stared in stunned silence. Even rookies who hadn't recognized Steven now whispered his name. "Is that Steven Seagal?" "No way. That explains everything." "Grant is dead." Grant heard the whispers. His embarrassment became rage. He shoved two officers aside and charged at Steven like a bull. But before he could even get close, a thunderous command shook the hallway. "Officer Grant, stand down." Grant froze mid-step. Everyone turned. Captain Morris, the highest-ranking officer in the building, was storming toward them, face red, eyes blazing. Grant tried to recover his stance. "Captain," this man refused ID, resisted detention, and "Shut your mouth." Morris snapped. Grant blinked. "But sir—" "Quiet." Morris pointed at Steven, then straightened his uniform with trembling hands before saying, "Sir, please forgive this officer. He doesn't know who he's dealing with." Grant's stomach dropped. "Sir," he whispered, confused. Morris breathed deeply. "You just laid hands on the newly appointed chief of the entire department." A wave of shock rippled through the room. Grant's face drained of color. Steven removed his sunglasses at last, his eyes steady, calm, disappointed. The room fell completely silent. Every officer felt the weight of that moment, including Grant. If you were standing there watching this live, would you support Steven or the officer? Comment below. For several seconds, no one breathed. Officer Grant stood frozen, his hands still half raised in a posture that now looked unbelievably stupid, like a child caught throwing a tantrum in front of the entire school. "See, Chief?" he whispered, voice cracking. "Chief who?" Steven didn't answer. He didn't need to. Captain Morris stepped forward, his voice low and trembling with anger. "Officer Grant, the man you've been shouting at, threatening, and physically attacking is Chief Steven Seagal, appointed this morning. The ceremony hasn't even started yet, and you've already embarrassed this department." The collective gasp moved like a wave across the hallway. Whispers rippled. He outranked the captain the whole time. "Oh my God, Grant is finished." Imagine attacking the new chief, Steven Seagal, of all people. Grant's jaw hung open. There was no excuse. No way out. His eyes darted between Steven and the captain. This is a mistake. He didn't identify himself. He refused ID. Captain Morris glared. He doesn't need to identify himself. His arrival notice was sent to every officer's inbox. You would have known if you'd read your damn emails. The room broke into muffled laughter. Grant felt the walls closing in on him. Steven looked at him calmly, too calmly. There was no anger in Steven's eyes. No satisfaction. No smugness. Just disappointment. Somehow, that felt worse than anything else. Steven spoke softly. I wasn't here to judge anyone today. I came to meet the department. Get a sense of the team. Start fresh. Grant swallowed hard. But instead, Steven continued, I found an officer willing to escalate a situation with a stranger before asking even one question. Grant felt the sting. His face burned. Sir? Chief? Steven? I didn't know, he stammered. That's the problem, Steven said. You didn't try to know. You reacted first. Grant's eyes dropped to the floor. The hallway had separated into two clear sides. One half watched Grant with shaking heads and smirks. The other half watched Steven with a mixture of fear, respect, and awe. Tension thickened when Lieutenant Harris, a senior officer known for fairness, stepped forward. Chief, Harris said cautiously, for what it's worth, many of us believed Grant went too far. We just didn't want to escalate things further. Steven nodded. I appreciate that. Then his gaze scanned the entire room. And I want everyone here to understand something very clearly. The officers leaned in, breath held. Steven clasped his hands behind his back. Strength isn't about dominating the weak. It's about controlling yourself, even when others don't. Silent nods filled the hallway. Steven continued, I'm not here to be your enemy. I'm here to protect this department, to fix what's broken, and to raise the standard so the public trusts us again. Officers shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew the department's reputation had been slipping in recent years. From this moment on, Steven said, voice firm, every officer under my command will be expected to act with honor, discipline, and restraint. Several officers straightened up instinctively, posture correcting. Grant felt smaller with every word. Finally, Grant spoke again, his voice thin and desperate. Chief, I'm begging you, don't fire me. I made a mistake. A stupid one. Please give me one more chance. Steven looked at him, expression unreadable. Grant, he said quietly, do you understand the gravity of what you did today? Grant nodded vigorously. Yes, sir. I do. You assaulted a superior officer. Grant's heart thudded. You disrespected a senior staff member while being watched by your peers. Grant's knees trembled. And worst of all, you demonstrated exactly the kind of behavior that destroys public trust. Grant's lip quivered. He almost looked like he might faint. Sir, I'll do anything. Retraining. Writing apology letters. Suspension. Anything but termination. Steven didn't say anything for a long time. The silence was unbearable. Finally, Steven broke the silence. Grant. Grant snapped his head up. Why, yes, Chief. I'm not going to fire you. A breath of shock swept across the room. Even Captain Morris blinked in surprise. Grant's eyes filled with relief. Thank you, sir. But, Steven added sharply, you will face discipline. Grant stiffened. You will undergo 6 weeks of mandatory retraining under my direct supervision. Grant nearly choked. Under you. Steven's expression hardened. If you don't like it, you can turn in your badge right now. Grant shook his head violently. No, I'll do it. Anything. Thank you, Chief. Thank you for giving me another chance. Steven folded his arms. This isn't a gift, he said. It's a test. You'll either rise, or you'll expose yourself. Grant nodded repeatedly, tears forming. Steven turned to the rest of the officers. And let this be a message to all of you. I don't believe in throwing people away. I believe in making them better. The officers exchanged glances, impressed, relieved, hopeful. And starting today, Steven said, every one of you will be held accountable, including me. Silence. Then, for the first time since Steven arrived, officers began to nod. A few even straightened their uniforms. A shift had begun, a new era, and everyone knew it. If you were the chief, would you forgive Officer Grant or fire him on the spot? Comment below. The ceremony room was packed. Rows of uniformed officers stood shoulder to shoulder, the press jammed in the back, cameras buzzing and blinking. The tension from the hallway incident still hung in the air, though most of the crowd only knew fragments. Whispers drifted around like smoke. He really confronted the new chief? Grant laid hands on Steven Seagal. Is that real? They say the chief didn't even raise his voice. Every eye turned to the front as Captain Morris stepped up to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, it is my honor to present our new chief of police, Steven Seagal. The room erupted. Not just applause, respectful, thunderous approval. Officers who had been skeptical only hours earlier now stood taller, eager, almost grateful. Steven walked forward slowly, his presence heavy, grounded. No swagger, no ego, just a man who radiated calm authority. When he reached the podium, he took a moment, scanning every face, making every officer feel seen. Thank you, he began, voice low but powerful enough to silence the room instantly. I'm not here to give a long speech. I'm here to make a promise. Everyone leaned forward. I promise to restore honor to this department. A few nods, a few murmurs. I promise to protect the people of this city and protect the integrity of this badge. More nods. And I promise to push every one of you to become better than you were yesterday. He let the words settle. This will not be a comfortable journey. Growth never is. But if you're willing to work, learn, and hold yourself to the highest standard, then I will stand with you. Every step of the way. The room felt electrified. But then, Steven added, and if you're here for power, ego, shortcuts, or intimidation, you will not last. Silence. A few officers looked at their boots. One officer shifted nervously, Officer Grant. Grant stood in the back, shoulders slumped, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The humiliation from earlier still burned. His uniform looked suddenly too large, his confidence stripped away. Steven glanced toward him. Not harshly, not mockingly, just a look that said, your test starts now. After the ceremony, everyone broke into groups for the chief's first official assessment, a department-wide tactical evaluation. Grant had hoped to blend into the back. He was wrong. Grant, Steven called, you're with me. A few officers smirked. Grant swallowed hard. Yes, sir. The training yard was open, cold, and unforgiving. Steven stepped onto the mat like a man stepping onto his own territory. Officers gathered around the edges, eager to see whether the rumors about Steven's skills were true. Today, Steven said, folding his arms, we're starting with control, physical and emotional. Grant nodded nervously. Show me how you restrain a suspect. Grant approached cautiously, reaching for Steven's arm. Steven didn't move. Grant tried again, gripping slightly harder. Steven still didn't move. Then, with one smooth motion, so fast it blurred, Steven shifted his weight and flipped Grant onto the mat. Not violently, not cruelly, just effortlessly. The crowd gasped. Grant lay there stunned, staring at the sky. Steven looked down at him. You rely too much on force, not enough on balance. Grant scrambled up, breath shaky. Again, Steven said. Grant attacked more aggressively this time, trying to prove himself. Another effortless counter. Grant hit the mat again. Snickers echoed around the yard. Silence, Steven commanded. Instant silence. Steven extended a hand. Grant hesitated, then took it. Steven pulled him to his feet. You're not here to be humiliated, Steven said quietly. You're here to learn. Grant blinked rapidly, emotion choking him. Yes, sir, he whispered. Good. Again. After the 10th takedown, Grant's breathing was ragged. Sweat dripped down his forehead. His pride was in pieces, scattered across the mat. But Steven's voice didn't carry judgment. It carried challenge. "You're improving," he said. "Your stance is better. Your hesitation is fading." Grant stared at him, shocked at the compliment. Steven leaned in slightly. "But discipline, that's still your missing piece." Grant stiffened. "You react before you think," Steven said. "You let ego decide your actions. And ego is the enemy of every officer who ever put on this uniform." Grant lowered his eyes. Steven placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "I'm not giving up on you," he said. "But you must decide if you're willing to change." Grant nodded quickly, almost desperately. "I am, sir. I promise." Steven stepped back. "Then prove it." When training ended, the officers walked away, buzzing with excitement. "Did you see how fast Seagal moved? He didn't even break a sweat. He's going to whip this department into shape." But what struck them most wasn't Steven's physical ability. It was the way he handled Grant. Firm, uncompromising, yet not cruel. Steven didn't humiliate Grant in front of everyone. Grant humiliated himself. But Steven gave him dignity back. And that kind of leadership, that was rare. Officer Harris approached Steven privately. "Chief," he said, "I've served under 5 different leaders. You're the first one who made us believe things can actually change." Steven nodded. "Then let's make it happen." As the sun dipped behind the training yard, Steven watched the officers scatter toward the precinct. He felt it. The shift. The beginning of something bigger. And he knew. The real test was still coming. Do you think Steven made the right choice by training Grant instead of firing him? Comment yes or no. By the next morning, the sun hadn't even risen when the phones started buzzing inside the precinct. Not one phone. Not 10. Every single phone. Ping after ping after ping. Officers glanced at their screens, confused at first, then stunned. A video had leaked. A video from yesterday. In crystal clear HD, shot from the training facility hallway. Officer Grant shouting. Grant grabbing Steven's arm. Grant trying to shove Steven. And Steven standing there, calm, unmoved, composed, like a stone pillar in a storm. But the part that went viral wasn't the confrontation. It was the moment Captain Morris shouted, "Officer Grant, that man is your new chief, Steven Seagal." The video exploded across the internet. Within hours, 50,000 views, 200,000, a million, then more. It hit international news. Talk shows discussed it. Clips flooded TikTok and YouTube. People reacted. Grant messed with Steven Seagal. Bro chose the wrong fight. This new chief is solid. Respect. This is how leadership should look. Grant is done. Seagal handled that like a monk, with the strength of a tank. The department's inbox overflowed with messages. Journalists crowded outside. The public demanded interviews. But Steven Seagal said nothing. Not a tweet. Not a public statement. Not even one comment. He didn't need to. When Steven walked in that morning, the entire precinct went silent. Everyone straightened their posture. Some nodded respectfully. Others avoided eye contact entirely. He wasn't just the new chief now. He was the man the whole world had watched stay calm under disrespect, without lifting a finger. Officer Grant sat alone at his desk, head buried in his hands. His face was pale, drained of sleep, drained of pride. When he saw Steven approach, he jumped to his feet. "Chief." "Sir. I never meant." Steven raised a hand gently. "Grant. Breathe." Grant froze. Steven stepped closer, lowering his voice so others wouldn't overhear. "You watched the video," Steven said. Grant nodded miserably. "You embarrassed yourself," Steven continued. "But you also embarrassed this department. That's the price of your actions." Grant's throat bobbed. "I know, sir. I know. I'll do anything to fix it, anything." Steven studied him for a moment, then said quietly, "Then let today be the day you stop being the problem and start being the example." Grant blinked. "Sir, you're going to stand in front of every officer in this building," Steven continued, "and explain what you learned." Grant's breath hitched. "A public apology?" "No," Steven said. A lesson. A real one. About ego. About control. About the responsibility of this badge. Grant's eyes filled with fear. Not fear of humiliation. Fear of failing. "Do you think I can do that, sir?" he asked shakily. Steven answered without hesitation. "I wouldn't ask if I didn't believe you could." Grant swallowed hard and nodded. 20 minutes later, the officers filled the briefing room, hundreds of them, arms crossed, eyebrows raised, waiting. Grant stepped up to the front like a man walking to his own execution. His hands trembled, his voice shook. But he began anyway. "I'm here today because yesterday I forgot what it means to be an officer." Silence. "I profiled a man without thinking. I disrespected a superior. I escalated a peaceful situation into a dangerous one. And I almost ruined my entire career because of ego." All eyes were on him. "But the chief," Grant continued, voice cracking, "he didn't destroy me. He didn't humiliate me. He didn't fire me. He gave me something I didn't deserve, another chance." Officers shifted. Some looked down. Some nodded. And then Grant said a sentence that stunned the entire room. "If the chief hadn't stopped me yesterday, I would have become the kind of officer the world is tired of seeing." The room went still. Grant wiped his eyes. "I'm not proud of what I did, but I am grateful I was corrected, because I want to be better. And I promise every one of you, I will never let ego speak louder than respect again." He stepped back. Silence. Then, one officer stood. Then another. Then another. And the room erupted in applause. Not sarcastic. Not forced. Real applause. Steven nodded once, just enough for Grant to see. He didn't smile. But he didn't need to. After the briefing, Grant approached Steven again, eyes red but posture stronger. "Chief," he said, voice steady. "Thank you for making me face myself." Steven placed a hand on his shoulder. "Grant, most people run from accountability. You stood in front of it." Grant straightened. And for the first time, Steven saw a real officer standing before him. Not a bully. Not a hothead. Not a threat. A man rebuilding himself from the inside out. By noon, something had shifted. Officers trained harder, talked more respectfully, handled the public with a new tone. Steven watched all of it quietly. He wasn't just leading a department. He was changing a culture, one day at a time, one officer at a time. And tomorrow, the real storm was waiting. But Steven Seagal, the calmest man in the room, the man who feared nothing, was ready. If Steven's leadership inspired you, type respect in the comments. By the end of the week, the video of Officer Grant confronting Steven Seagal had hit numbers no one expected. 10 million views. 20 million. By Friday, 42 million. It wasn't just trending anymore. It had become a worldwide conversation. News headlines popped up everywhere. New Chief Steven Seagal handles aggressive cop with Zen-like calm. Officer learns big lesson after mistakenly attacking his own chief. The most respectful leadership moment caught on camera. International celebrities shared the clip. Motivational speakers used it as an example of restraint and leadership. Even police departments from other countries commented. This is how a real leader handles conflict. Discipline plus humility equals strength. Inside the precinct, the energy felt completely different. Officers walked taller, not from ego, but from pride. Reporters gathered outside, hoping for statements. Community members sent letters thanking the department for showing real accountability. But through all the chaos, Steven stayed the same, calm, collected, and focused on the mission. Officer Grant changed almost overnight, not because of fear, but because of realization. He arrived early every day, trained harder than anyone else, volunteered for extra duties, and apologized to officers he had once disrespected. Some officers teased him in the beginning, trying to be teacher's pet. "You scared of the chief now?" But the teasing stopped when they saw something real. A man trying to rebuild his character. One morning, Steven caught Grant practicing wrist control techniques alone on the mat at 5 a.m. "Early start?" Steven asked. Grant stood at attention automatically. "Trying to get better, sir." Steven nodded. That's how change happens. Quietly, before the world wakes up. Grant's eyes softened. Thank you for not giving up on me. For now, Steven said lightly. Grant smiled for the first time in days. At the end of the week, Steven held his first community forum, open to civilians, reporters, activists, and local families. Hundreds showed up. People expected anger, expected complaints, expected accusations. Instead, something different happened. One woman stood and said, "Chief Seagal, what you did with that officer showed real leadership. You didn't humiliate him. You corrected him." Another man added, "We need more cops to learn the lesson he learned." A teenager said, "It was cool seeing someone powerful stay calm." And a little girl raised her hand and asked, "Are you really the chief and a martial arts master?" The crowd laughed. Steven smiled gently. "I try my best." By the end of the meeting, the room felt unified, something the department hadn't experienced in years. A single video had sparked it, but Steven's leadership had sustained it. Within days, national TV stations invited Steven for interviews. Police academies requested him as a guest instructor. Even government officials reached out privately. But Steven declined every interview. He wasn't seeking fame. He wanted the department to speak for itself. And slowly it did. Crime reports began decreasing. Community complaints lessened. Officers handled situations with more discipline and patience. The city noticed. The country noticed. The world noticed. And the department that once struggled with public trust was becoming a symbol of reform. On Friday evening, Steven gathered the entire department. No podium, no cameras, just a room full of officers and their chief. He looked around the room slowly. "This week," he said, "you showed the world something powerful." Officers listened closely. "You showed that respect is stronger than force, that discipline is stronger than ego, and that growth is possible, even for those who fall hardest." Grant lowered his head, humbled. Steven continued, "We're just getting started. There will be tougher days, harder tests, bigger challenges." He paused. "But if we face them with the same humility we showed this week, then this department will become a model for every other department in this country." Silence. Then applause erupted, loud, unified, proud. Steven didn't raise his hands, didn't smile widely, didn't bask in it. He simply nodded once. His message had landed. If you believe no one should be judged by appearance, type respect in the comments and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.